to Business Leaders Coach, the podcast that educates, equips, enables, and empowers you to grow yourself, your business, and enjoy your life. My name is Toyoshin B, and in this episode, I'm so excited to have our guest, Jasmin Thomas. Now, Jasmin is a passionate entrepreneur, a woman on a mission. She was recently featured on Virgin Startup with the title, "This is What a Founder Looks Like." She has an amazing story about how she ended up funding and starting her own company and is now on a mission to change the femtech space. Jasmin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. As always, an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Yes, it's definitely a pleasure, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot out of this wonderful conversation. So your story is amazing, but maybe you can tell our viewers what got you to start your own company, because I know that there's an interesting story behind that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I worked at S3 with you for many, many years. I think I started in 2000 and 10 years ago, whatever, 10 years, 2011. And actually so I was working in recruitment for years, and what actually happened is in 2015, I was diagnosed with MS, which is multiple sclerosis, also an autoimmune disease that affects the nerve endings of my brain and spinal cord. It also just so happens that the day after that, I just started working in Real, jumping from Huxley to Real. And the first client they gave me was one called GW Pharmaceuticals. So they are the biggest medical exporters of cannabis globally, and they have a drug out, and that's been through clinical trials. And it just so happens the drug is for MS. Mm-hmm. So, at this time, I was looking at exploring alternative medicines because I wasn't able to accept any disease-modifying drugs. And given that I was working with GW at the time, I had a really good understanding of cannabis-based drugs and side effects for MS and the benefits that it could have for me. So that just led me to do loads of research, get loads of information about it. I went to loads of different sort of trade shows, dragged my mum to way too many cannabis festivals than she would probably like or hope for from her 25-year-old daughter. But we went to Spain, to Prague, to Las Vegas, and we basically just went on this mission to really research and find out as much about medical cannabis as we could. My granddad is a Rasta, he's from the Caribbean, and he had been long preaching our whole life, the medical benefits of cannabis. And we were just yet to really understand it and kind of really grasp the what he was saying. So from then, I became very passionate about cannabis and what it could do for my health. That led me to start Ohana, which is an all plant-based natural skincare routine that utilizes CBD and other plant-based ingredients to put your well-being first. And then from that, really building up a community of people that would potentially need CBD, would want to use CBD and could be living off the benefits. Our main audience has always been towards women because that's just part of my passion. Even at S3, doing women in tech and women in finance, I would always be part of the roundtables and supporting them from a recruitment perspective. And then that's really evolved now into what I see from my community and a reflection of what's needed. It is, the support and the continuing empowerment and uplifting of the community of women with their health. More specifically, my niche is looking at women with autoimmune diseases. There are 4 million people in the UK with an autoimmune disease, and 80% of them are women. So this is, we're having a really big impact on our health. And because of the lack of data and being left out of clinical trials through, drug development in the whole of history, maybe included in the last 20 years, we have a lot of data gaps that we need to fill in order for us to answer these questions as to why women's health is being impacted at a far greater rate than men, and what we can do through technology and through advancement to, close in on this gap and help women as much as we can, and, allow women to take control of their health. That is my story so far.
That is amazing. There are lots of things there that so first of all, I'm guessing that not everybody is familiar or well educated, because I know that we had this conversation right at the beginning. I do remember that this cannabis thing, please help me understand. If you remember, we had that conversation, I think when we sat together at one point. And maybe you can sort of help people to understand the distinction so that people understand, the nuances around this and how they are, the benefits and the specific type that from what you know.
Yeah. So, what I use now, what I use in my product is CBD. It is the second most abundant cannabinoid or like chemical compound found in the cannabis and hemp plant. More specifically, what I use is from a hemp plant, which makes it totally legal. It doesn't have any of the psychotropic effects in that, say, THC would, which people would maybe use for recreational reasons or to get high. CBD is much more non-psychotropic. It works on different parts of our system. We are all born with an endocannabinoid system, though, which is like an immune system. It's something that exists within us. And when we consume cannabinoids, it interacts with that endocannabinoid system. So we get it from different foods and different plants, and it is something that our body is set up and ready to work with. So I do feel like, it's definitely a really interesting medicine because it is obviously meant for us. If our body has a system and a pathway for it to work on, then in the grand scheme of things, it was probably designed for us to use in some way.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I think it's good for people to understand that. But as I'm sure you would know, that I'm sure there are quite a number of people that are uncovering these things, or as you said, yours is very personal because of your health situation. But not many people will end up starting a business around it. So obviously that makes you quite unique. So what was it that made you then think, I need to turn this into a business, and what sort of were some of the motivations around going down that path?
The 28-day holiday allowance that I was allowed at S3 did not suit me at all. There was an absolute multitude of things. I did really feel like I'm a keen traveler. I did really feel like, not being able to work from home when you wanted. Obviously, post-pandemic, things are different, but this was like 3 years ago. Not being able to work from home when you wanted. There's kind of like a structure and order that you have to kind of like abide by. And I felt that limited me in some ways as well, because it's a bit different and difficult. And I think that, I just kind of feel like those sort of things were quite challenging and not something that I necessarily enjoy. In that situation, or in my last role, I could not be, ultimately it cracks down to be, I could not be my authentic self. I felt that I had to behave in a certain way, talk a certain way, be a certain way, and that was not good for my health. And that was not good for me as a person, and didn't sit comfortably with me. So ultimately, I wanted to do something, like I wanted to sit down and speak about cannabis all day, and and that's not really that great. So I wanted to be able to be my authentic self. That's what I would say is the ultimate reason as to what led me to be a founder, because there's no better way of being able to just be who you want to be when you work for yourself.
Yeah. So obviously, I guess for most small business owners in particular, once you start your own thing, you realize that there's some different skill sets that you now need to bring on board or quickly accelerate your learning. So what were some of the skill sets that you realized that you needed to add to the skill sets that you already had, obviously?
Financial modeling.
Okay.
Got a C in math, very basic. Didn't enjoy math at all. Things like that, becoming up with a financial forecast, being able to put that together for a deck when you're going out for investment, and really explain to people that are going to trust you with their money, how you're going to turn this into a 10 times multiple. It's very, I found that in the beginning very tricky. But what I have learned and what I found very interesting is I thought I wasn't good at these things 3 years ago, because they just weren't in my everyday skill set and I didn't have to be good at them. And now 3 years later, I'm like, I've actually learned all these things. So it wasn't that I wasn't good at them. It's just that I didn't know, and I didn't have the learning of it, or kind of the experience of it. So now, you know, I'm a lot less intimidated by a financial model, but I feel like that was my biggest kind of learning curve was that really. And what else was there? You know, and it's also, to be fair, from the beginning, I've always been very good at, I am not a master of everything. I know what I'm good at. I know, you know, I remember back in the day, Toya, we do those personal profiles and kind of like, you know, who are we? I'm a campaigner. I'm a leader. So I know that they are my strengths and what I can play to and what I think is good. And then I'm really good at placing those people around me that are amazing, far better than what they do. But what I can do is tell them the story and tell them the vision and get them to buy into the vision to join me on the journey.
Well, those are some fantastic leadership skills, obviously casting a vision.
You taught me it all.
Now, obviously, being a Black woman in business, an entrepreneur, I'm sure there's a lot of things that, you know, you would see that even someone like myself might not be able to see. Maybe you can tell us some of the things that you realized, obviously, you know, coming into this entrepreneurship world, that you uncovered, and maybe things that have added to you being on this mission.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, like women, like I said, like women through any kind of industry or any profession I've worked in previously have always been at the forefront of my mind. You cannot help but always recognizing yourself as being a Black person in any profession, I personally think as well. Just because, you know, if you're assertive and you have a certain tone, it could be perceived as very different as to what a Caucasian counterpart would be, and that was kind of like from my previous experience. But I also went into this, even though that was my experience, I did also go into it quite naively. Like I started the business with a co-founder who was male. I mean, we don't work together. We're still best friends. We don't work together anymore though. So, you know, whenever we went to a bank, the questions were like pointed to him. It's like, and he's like, no, I'm not the director. Like I can't sign for this. Or when we go into investment meetings, it's like, you know, all the questions and everything's directed at him. And he's like, I don't have the answers. Like, you know, this is Jasmin's gig. You know, and then even when you start looking at it, like I sat on some panels before, and then you really start unearthing the stats, like only 10 Black female founders have gained VC money, you know, in the UK. And like, I can't remember exactly, but in a long time, basically. That's obscene. Like, you know, it's like we are, as a woman, as a female founder, you're already only getting 0.2% of the VC funds that's getting distributed, you know, every year. Being a Black female founder, you're going down to 0.002.
Wow.
I'm more likely going to win the lottery than get VC funding. So I'm doing the lucky dip every week because it's 184 million this week. And I'm more likely to get that than I am VC funding, which is, you know, terribly scary, especially when you consider, you know, female founded business have a 30% better return on investment. And we're working in a space now where it's like, you know, there is, thank God, we are seeing better demand and better understanding of female health, but not only female health, Black female health, where you are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth, you know, where you are 3 times more likely to have breast cancer. So these are all really, really important issues that we have to address. And, you know, I'm still very hopeful that cash flow and money will be, you know, funneled into this space to overcome these sort of things. So I think that's kind of like my experience as well as being a Black female founder, and then just really uncovering these kind of things as I go on, going into it quite naively, learning a lot, and then making sure my learns don't deter me in any way and don't, you know, kind of like don't allow me to think that as a barrier of entry.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously your mindset has maybe helped you to push you through that. But I mean, do you have an idea? I mean, it's kind of like a generic question to ask, but I think it's important. What are your thoughts in terms of why you think that these stats that you've just given are the case? So any reasons?
I mean, it's like, you know, women alone have been left out of the conversation. So then when you're taking away, like, you know, you've already got a really, really small pool. I don't think, you know, I think it's like a confidence thing as well. I think, you know, if you know those stats, you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to bootstrap and I'm going to try and fund it myself and I'm going to do this myself, because one, you may not have the confidence, so you think, if it's only happening to 10 other women out there, why am I going to be the 11th or 12th? But, I think that's a really hard stat to go against. It's the, there's so many kind of like social and economic contributions that go into it. It's, friends and family rounds being really popular. And, if that person or if a certain sort of peer group doesn't have the funds, I think there's loads of different things that come into it. There was a really interesting study actually done by a guy from this DC called 1010, and he spoke to 150 Black founders from the UK, and then it really, really pulled up some of the reasons why. I would refer back to that for better reasoning, but kind of like just from a high level point of view from my experience so far, I would say those are the reasons as to why. But I think it's we have just many, many barriers of entry. And I think it's deterring when you have so many barriers of entry, because you've got to work twice as hard, twice as fast, and be 10 steps ahead of the game, while you are already probably having more, it's more kind of, I don't know how to describe it, where you have other emotionally exhausting things around you. Like in the last year, we've had since George Floyd and BLM, it's been exhausting to be a Black founder, and it's just it's been exhausting to be in the Black community. So you have that stress on top of everything else. It's like it's a lot.
And so obviously you're still pushing forward. So where do you get your confidence from? Because earlier on you talked about with the finance thing, for instance, you said that you realized that you didn't have to be intimidated. So where do you think you get your confidence from?
You know what? I think it's from my family. It's from my parents. I think my parents are just very confident people, and they were always, very strong, very opinionated. I mean, my family in general is, I feel like I had examples as well that you didn't necessarily have to have a degree to be successful, and that there were people from my family that were successful that I was like, oh cool, if they can do it, I can definitely do it. I do think it's a really interesting thing about right time and right place, and kind of always kind of going back to the Outliers book of is this just innate or is it right time and place, and kind of wanted to challenge that thought process as well. And I'm basically when I think about that sort of thing, it's mostly competitive with myself. But I think definitely my parents really, and my family is where I get my confidence from. And I think that's probably been part of my problem as well, and why another contributing reason why I became an entrepreneur, because you sit in a ranking level within an organization, so you can't be sitting down here and have the confidence of this person up there, because that doesn't really work. And I feel like that is a struggle that I've probably had for many years of my life.
So it seemed like you had the...
You've seen the example, so you've seen it firsthand.
But it's interesting because one of the sort of principles that I always teach is that a lot of things are caught, not taught. And it's interesting that you just talked about your parents role modeling things, and those are things that sometimes they're hard to teach, but people around you catch certain things, which is amazing. But I mean, let's now talk about this sort of the mission that you're now on, femtech. So give us some insight into why and why now.
Why now? I think we are in a time and place in history where it's why not? But when I say that, I think that we're making loads of advancements. Then you just look into other countries and you're actually the advancements are very siloed to the Western world and the Western culture. But us as women, I feel like we are more empowered, more enabled to do kind of work, be entrepreneurs, and do things for ourselves more than ever. I think I see that even with myself, having a 10-month-old baby, I'm still able to work every day, pursue my passions and career. And, it's just something that we are set up in a society where we can do now. what was the question again? I've actually forgot it on that.
Yeah, about femtech.
Femtech, yeah. So female technology, and I think, you know, there is now recognition that we need to bridge the data gap and to provide better. You know, most women for their time of the month, they are going to rely on paracetamol and ibuprofen. These are drugs that were designed over 20, 30 years ago. No women were using the clinical trials. We have no, you know, like clinical data of long-term useful outcomes for women, you know, apart from anecdotal, apart from, you know, what we've seen happen just in real life. You know, we'll see it as lately as the COVID vaccine, you know, the changes in the menstruation cycle that it caused for women was not considered as a side effect. Could you imagine if that was affecting something of a man, that it would obviously be, you know, seen as a side effect? So I feel like, you know, we have the confidence and we have the people and we're getting into better positions within the professional industry of science and STEM to be able to actually have our voices heard and to be able to kind of like take up space. So I feel like that's really what's happening. We're able to take up more space now. And I think, you know, it's been developing over the last couple of years, since maybe like 2016. And we've seen a lot of the low-hanging fruits being taken. So fertility, pregnancy, menopause, period care. You know, we've seen these 4 areas and 4 pillars really be kind of like built up and to really add like, you know, value to like women's lives. You know, I kind of like was doing cycle tracking to get pregnant, to be able to work out when I was ovulating. And I've been using that since maybe I was like 27. My 12-year-old niece uses that. And I think, you know, that's so empowering for her because I'm like, you know, she will know her body inside out by the time she's 20, 21, which is not something that I had the, you know, the fortune of having or doing, you know. So I think that these are things that we're learning a lot later in life now. So I think that we are in just a very, very good place in history to be able to kind of like do this. So we've really seen the low-hanging fruits make very good advancements. For me now is looking at, they're not the only 4 pillars of women's health. We have hormone health. There should be miscarriage care. We have, you know, we're suffering from chronic conditions far greater than our male counterparts. You know, what can we do to really uplift women's health and empower women's health in those areas? And I think it needs to be more tailored. You know, I think we are so fortunate in this country to have the NHS. You know, I have like family who are living in America or Africa right now, which don't have access to it. And it's like, you know, they want to have a scan because they're pregnant and they can't get access to it because their health insurance is saying no, or, you know, it's too expensive and stuff. So I would just like to start to say, like, you know, I'm so fortunate of that. But at the same time, it is not a tailored approach. So we need to be looking at how we can tailor this approach and more preventative care for women as well. So we don't get lost in, like, you know, the generic NHS system, which, to be honest, was my experience with being diagnosed with MS, speaking to my neurologist and saying, okay, I would like to look at gut health or leaky gut syndrome, or, you know, let's try and get to the root cause of this. And they're saying, we just don't do this. We have 5 drugs available, choose one. And that's as far as it went, where actually I then had to go do a load of research, find my own health practitioners. And if I had a platform to provide that for me at the time, it would have been a lot easier. I would have had earlier intervention, and who knows, potentially I have a really good outcome anyway because I'm relatively healthy, but could have been an even better outcome.
Yeah. Okay. So so out of this, what's the next sort of, obviously what you're talking about is really important. So what do you foresee? Is this something that you're actually kicking something off for yourself in terms of, are you starting something to as part of the solution to this, or are you gathering a community? What's sort of your plan around how to take this mission forward?
So at the moment, I mean, it doesn't have a name yet, so we'll call it Ohana, so it's going to come under the umbrella of Ohana. But we are building a platform that streamlines the way in which you report symptoms to allow for early intervention of medical care to improve the long-term outcome. So that is ultimately what we're doing. So, and also because of telehealth at the moment and all of our, you know, all of our appointments going online with our GP, if we are able to track our symptoms, take photos, and then share that with our chosen health practitioner, then that is going to be a lot more effective. From my doctors I speak to, you know, they say someone comes in and they're like, oh, my chest hurts, and they're grabbing up here, when it's like, well, actually, no, that's not your chest. That's like, could be your throat, your thyroid, your shoulder, like kind of like, you know, any area up here where there's a lot of confusion. So if we can provide a platform in which ways people can efficiently track their symptoms and as correctly as possible, then that's going to help. I think we need to build a community as well. What I really found through my experience is people need a community. When you're pregnant, you need other pregnant people to be like, is this normal? When you've had a child, my child like crawled off the bed. Is that normal? Yes, it absolutely happens to everyone. So it's also building that community, and then also having some health practitioners there with different interests. So if I could have gone to a doctor, say for example, who had an interest in gut health and gut microbiome, in looking at how that can literally, or the link between gut-brain axis, for example, which is really popular these days, and our gut is our second brain, and we're seeing more and more data. But 5 years ago, when I was interested in it, I looked at it, it wasn't something that was possible. But if I could choose through like a monthly payment fee to get some sort of like tailored approach, and that would really help as well. So it's like a three-pronged approach. That's what we're doing at the moment. And it also allows people with autoimmune disease to get access to some sort of private healthcare or more tailored approach, because it's very hard for people. Like for me, for example, I can't get private healthcare because I've got MS. So, it makes it quite difficult. So that's kind of what we are looking to do.
Okay. So the people that you would want to contact you on this will be medical professionals, as well as any other type of sort of groups from what you just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, from the feedback we've had so far, and like the kind of people that have messaged me, it's really interesting and really validating to hear those stories, to hear, that it takes 7 years to get an endometriosis diagnosis on average. What's been your experience in that? What can we do from a tech perspective to improve or streamline the timeline from first symptom to diagnosis for you? And from a healthcare perspective, from a GP perspective, what can we do to make their life easier? They have a really, really hard time. They're understaffed, they're underpaid. They have constraints of the NHS that they need to abide by. What can we do to make their life easier? And I suppose that's what we really want as well. If we're making their life easier, then they're having a better all-round experience, and hopefully that's also reflected on the end patient as well.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we'll definitely make sure that your details are in the show notes, so that if people want to contact you to join in, as you said, building this community, that they can do that. Obviously, Business Leaders Coach is all about helping small, medium-sized businesses to follow their passion, similar to what you've said, to build something that will grow, help them grow, but also impact their customers. Any input in terms of, that you would give to leaders who are running their small, medium-sized business, especially in this 21st century, post this pandemic? What are some tips that maybe you want to share?
I think my kind of favorite thinking or thought process is just don't have limiting beliefs. I think, that's something that I've had to work really hard on over the last couple of years. And as confidently, outwards as I speak and stuff, of course I have some imposter syndrome sometimes and some limiting beliefs. But I think overcoming them is really a good thing to do, because it kind of just, you will just do things that you wouldn't necessarily do, or you don't feel restricted in any way. So I think not to have limiting beliefs really helps. Also, just from the way you speak, from the way you present yourself. If you're presenting yourself as people are going to buy into that no matter what. Are you smiling? If you agree with me?
No, I agree with you. I agree. I agree, because I think even you were telling me the other day about a pitch you did, and how you got the attention very quickly. Maybe you want to share something. Yeah.
My deck was crap. I literally done my deck an hour before, and it was because I spoke confidently and I spoke so passionately that was recognised, and I was able to win that. And I think that comes through just so much. And I was reminded that again on the weekend when I was speaking to someone about this idea, and they were doing something separate, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I kind of gave up." So I just didn't really think it was the limiting belief was really coming through. And I thought, no, you could have done that. You'd have definitely done that. But yeah, you just kind of have to be your biggest fan. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you think into the future, obviously what you're talking about, um, you know, there are things that are going to change how we do things in the future. I mean, even this what you just mentioned in terms of the femtech and how we handle our health and
Hmm.
even So, what are some of the things that you foresee? I don't know, 5, 10 years trends that you would maybe see. I think this is maybe how things will eventually end up operating.
I think there's going to be way more technology integrated with the NHS and NHS recommendations for apps to use as well. I think there'll be far greater emphasis on community as well, and that there will be a ready-made community for everybody to join and to be a part of to suit their specific needs and niches. And I also think that we are, from a medical perspective, will see a greater understanding of things like gut health, of plant-based medicine. So we're looking at cannabis and CBD, but also psychedelics as well. We're seeing, I can never say the word is psilocybin or something like that, but like mushroom health. And we're seeing people overcome depression, anxiety, many kind of different health implications. And I think it will be way more tailored. We are all very, very individual. MS affects no two people the same. It's all very, very separate. So if we are able to, design our kind of like our plan to ourselves, then it will be a lot more effective. And look at preventative measures as well. We're seeing a lot of startups coming up within the preventative space. So there are some things that we are doing, whether it's that through our personal body care, through the products that we're using, through having hormone disruptors interacting with our body and our hormones. There's something we're doing that is kicking off a chain reaction that is causing these autoimmune diseases and these illnesses. There's a reason why, there's something in our lifestyle or our diet that, breast cancers are far greater in the UK than they are in Southeast Asia or something like that. So it's really looking at these things and looking at how we can prevent them. I think they're the biggest trends and what we will see most notably over the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow. Yeah, spot on. I totally agree with you on that. Things will radically change. Just as we begin to wrap up, let's talk about your own sort of, how do you learn? How do you love to learn? Me, I love reading books. So, I mean, what is it for you?
I remember doing this in a session with you as well. Before, I am an audio learner. That's how I know I am an audio learner. I just love to watch. I can watch a documentary or watch a panel or watch something, and that is how I learn. I do like reading. I'm going to read this. This is just come through the post actually. Okay. It's called Fundraising by Ryan Breslow, and it's really short as well, which is like good for me.
It's good.
But I'm not like an avid reader just because I just like time does not permit. I got into the bath to read this yesterday, and my child screamed the house down until I got out. So it's just very limiting with what I can with reading. But apart from my kind of like my news reading in the morning, but I definitely an audio reader, yeah. And I like interacting and learning from other people, like having conversations. So for me, like if you're doing something on the board and kind of going through different ways in which to sell to someone, I'm going to be listening to that. You're going to give me a book and ask me to go and read it, I'm not going to find it as engaging. These are the sort of things that I came out well with. I know what my personality traits. That's I know that I'm a campaigner. I know that I'm an audio learner. So these are the sort of things that you taught me that I carry with me.
No, brilliant.
Evidently,
brilliant.
I haven't forgotten.
Excellent. Wow. Well, Jasmin, it's really been a pleasure having you on the show and sharing your wisdom, your passion. I think everybody listening to this or watching this will know that your passion comes through, and I think this is just the beginning of the impact that you're going to have on this landscape in terms of these areas that you've talked about, which are pivotal and they're really important. Any last words for our audience in terms of things that you want them to take away to know about you, or how they can contact you, or anything like that?
We can put my Instagram and my website on the links on the post as well. But really and truly, I would just like to say thank you to you. Like, obviously, as you can tell, when you're asking me these questions and you're like, what kind of personality are you? How do you learn? These are all ways in which that I've learned through doing sessions with you over the last couple of years. And I feel like, having somebody like that in my kind of like professional life has always really helped. and it's obviously things that I've very much kept on to and have sort of like carried me through. So I'm just very, very grateful for you for that and for those teachings and learnings. So I'm just very thankful. So thank you, Toya.
Well, it's a pleasure. I wasn't expecting that, but thanks a lot, Jasmin. And yes, so thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have you back again. But we wish you every success on all these endeavors as we celebrate you as a mom as well, a woman on a mission. Exactly. But thanks a lot. Thank you, Jasmin.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.